Well, let's now go to Portland, Oregon, where police are investigating after one person was killed in a shooting overnight. Now, this happened as pro and anti-Trump demonstrators were filling city streets. It is unclear, though, whether the shooting is actually related to those protests. Portland has been the site of unrest for many months now. And with that, let's bring in Katie Simpson right now. She is in Washington tracking the story for us. Katie, nice to see you. What more do we know about the unrest in Portland?
What we know so far is that there was a large caravan demonstration gathering just in the suburbs of Portland yesterday afternoon. Organizers say there were about 3,000 people, about 600 vehicles. Many of them had Trump flags, and this was supposed to be a demonstration to show support for President Trump in and around the Portland area, where there has been so much criticism of the president, and there have been very significant protests in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. Portland, of course, has been the scene where federal agents were sent in to try and calm those protests, only really making those tensions even worse, making the scene even more raw. But in that situation yesterday, those pro-Trump supporters, they were confronted by some supporters of the Black Lives Matter movement before they even hit the road, and there were tensions that were very clear from the very beginning. As the caravan made its way through the city, it was not supposed to actually go to the downtown area where there have been those protests, but some of the pro-Trump supporters did go into the city, and when they went into the city, they were met by Black Lives Matter's activists and sympathizers and supporters, and you can see social media video of people on the street throwing things at the pro-Trump supporters, as well as people from that pro-Trump movement. They are actually firing tear gas at the supporters, and we do have one video from a New York Times reporter, and we can bring it up, and that video shows people in a pro-Trump vehicle, a truck, sitting in the back of the truck, having a paintball gun, firing paintballs at those people on the street. So there were fist fights in the street. There were clashes. And this was sort of the scene that was taking place in different spots all over downtown Portland when there was some sort of altercation and someone was shot and killed. Now it's believed that the individual who was killed, he was wearing a hat that is linked to a far-right group. It's unclear exactly what the circumstances of that shooting were. It's being investigated right now as a homicide. No arrests have been made, but it certainly, this situation devolved very quickly through the night, and those protests continued after the violence erupted.
Now, this is happening as the U.S. President, Donald Trump, is trying to essentially position himself as the candidate who can bring an end to the unrest. What's he saying about this today?
Well, Donald Trump is using what happened in Portland today as a way to really go after the Democratic leaders at the state and local level. It's something we've seen him do before. He had a flurry of tweets and retweets attacking the mayor, the local mayor there, as well as trying to make the argument that no one would be safe if Democrats win the federal election. This is what you're going to see happening in this Democrat-run city, Democrat-run state, and trying to use this as a case to bolster himself. Chad Wolf, who's the acting Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, was asked about this today and asked about whether he supports invoking the Insurrection Act to bring in military officials against U.S. citizens, given the constant unrest that they've seen in Portland. Here's what he said.
We've been asking the governor and others to send in the National Guard to address the violence so that you don't have dueling demonstrations. You don't have this violence that occurs night after night after night on the streets of Portland.
So he didn't get into the specifics about the Insurrection Act. He didn't want to get ahead of the president, he said. But again, the Trump administration is calling on the local governors, the state governor, the local mayor, to call in the National Guard, to call for help. So far, those calls have been resisted. But there have been demonstrations in other places across the U.S. today as well, or last night as well. In Washington, D.C., police used tear gas to break up protests in and around sort of near the White House, near Black Lives Matter Plaza. And there have been continued protests in different American cities, particularly protests that sort of ramped up again after the shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha.
Katie, thank you for that.
Thanks.